It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
You went and had a look at the machine and saw that I'd effectively put about 2.5 to 3 loads worth of washing in and done it all in one load. And you were like, if you put too much in, you get a crappy result.
And that's sometimes what our lives feel like.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Families podcast. This is Dr. Justin Coulson here with Kylie, my wife and mum to our 6 kids. I'm the parenting expert on the just finished season 2 of Parental Guidance, the hit TV show on Channel 9 that I did great stuff in the ratings. People loved it. And you were just saying to me off air that everyone you talk to is making judgments about different parents. Everyone says, I couldn't do a show like that. It's so judgy. The people on the show aren't that judgy, but everyone off the show is pretty judgy. Let me just say, the things people say off air about what's happening on the show is just enormous. I was getting my legs waxed on Tuesday. I don't know if I just overshared. Did I just share too much?
Maybe.
I think I might. Okay, so
could have just said you were on the table.
That's on the table. I was on the leg waxing table. Okay, on the massage table. And for those of you who are now wondering what on earth you're listening to, this is the Happy Families podcast. I am Justin. I'm a cyclist. And for the last however long, I've removed hair from my legs because cyclists.
Well, let's just be very clear. You do not wax your legs because you're a cyclist.
I do. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't a cyclist.
Really?
Yes. Cyclists remove the hair from their legs. Actually, I don't wax my legs because I'm a cyclist. I would shave my legs because I'm a cyclist, but you won't let me shave them because you find spiky legs uncomfortable in bed, and you've told me that I'm not allowed to shave my legs, which leaves me with no option but to wax them. Have we gone too far? Have I just? I
have not gone anywhere.
Right. Okay. Well,
I'm
just trying to explain. Now, why am I telling you about the waxing tape? Oh, that's right. Because my what would I call her? My waxer?
Your beautician is actually.
No, I can't say that I have a beautician. That's sending all the wrong messages. I feel worse saying that than saying that I got waxed. The woman who is doing my leg waxing because I'm a cyclist and because you won't let me shave my legs, her name is Gemma.
Your beauty technician?
And she doesn't have kids. She's like, I don't know, in her mid-40s, doesn't have any kids, and she's hooked on the show. And she's like, I didn't even know that this show came on, and I'm like, I waxed that guy. I waxed that guy. And then she just starts telling me all about the show and how she feels about this couple and this family and that family. I'm like, man, people have got strong opinions about this show, even when they don't have kids. It's just so much fun. Anyway, Kylie, today is the day that we do I'll Do Better Tomorrow. It's the day where we step into the, how are we going as parents? What can we do better? What do we need to do differently? Before we do that, though, I want to share an email. Every now and again, we get nice things said about us. Sometimes we get not nice things said as well, but every now and again, we get nice things said about us. And I kind of feel like the podcast is the place to share that. So I want to share an email that came through to podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au from Sean, who said, on Saturday, we met. So this was a couple of weeks ago. On Saturday, we met at the Resilient Kids Conference in Brisbane. Oh, I should also mention, we've got one coming up in Adelaide and one coming up in Melbourne. So please visit. Just Google Resilient Kids Conference and you'll find what you need. Anyway, Sean just said, I'm an OG listener of the podcast and I've listened to every episode.
I know what OG means now.
Yeah.
It's original.
Yeah, look at you go. I feel like I need to high five you across the table. I'm an OG listener and have listened to every episode through the various formats. And by the way, the current format is the best by far. We love hearing Kylie's beliefs, opinions and experiences. What is it with you? Everyone just loves you. Everyone, like, the podcast is better with you along.
They're not saying it wasn't great before. They're just acknowledging they'd like to hear my voice.
Anyway, Sean just sent this beautiful email through and said a whole lot of really nice things. They've got a daughter who is very, very unwell. She spent a lot of time in hospital. And Sean said, you and Kylie have been a reassuring voice through our hospital stays as we listen intently to your Justinisms and messages. A lot of families would crumble under the circumstances we've been dealt, but we're stronger than ever. You've been part of that. And I'm going to get it weepy, and we want to say thank you. So I just wanted to acknowledge Sean's email because it was beautiful and it made me weepy. It made me so grateful for the work that we're able to do. And I mean, this podcast is a lot of fun, but there's a really serious side to it. And that is we want to help families to be happier. I've also got to mention the podcast wouldn't exist were it not for our Happy Families members. Our Happy Families members provide us with the resources to do all of the work that we do. Now, I know that there's a little bit of advertising on the podcast, but it doesn't come close to covering what it needs to allow us to help people. And so if you're not a Happy Families member, can I encourage you to have a look at what that membership is? It's very, very cheap, extremely affordable, and it helps every family. It allows us to provide premium resources to the people who are paying for the membership, as well as all of the free resources that people get. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that. Also say thank you so much to Sian, because that was such a wonderful, beautiful email, and I appreciate it so much. All right, Kylie, let's dive into it. Today, you're going to share your I'll Do Better Tomorrow based on what's happened this past week. What's worked? What hasn't? How's your parenting been intentional or not over the last week or so?
So it's funny how no matter how many times we go through this, we constantly have to reassess where we're at and what things are going well and what things are not. And the times where we actually take that assessment to heart, we see the greatest growth.
Yes.
And so recently we've kind of, as a couple, acknowledged that there are some things in the home that we could really work on well. And one of them, we didn't actually use these words, but in hindsight, as I've looked back, it's about creating margin in our lives. And Sunday comes around every week, and every week we're rushed out the door as we head off to church. So church starts at 12 noon.
Right.
We have an entire morning with no other requirements. There's nothing in our way. There's nothing stopping us from getting ready in a timely fashion. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a bit of a false sense of security because we have so much time. And so we sat down with the kids and I just said, all right, things need to change. I really don't like the stress of Sundays when we're kind of all racing out the door and somebody's sitting in the car kind of saying, I've been waiting for ages. And it just gets really hectic. And so this time round, I said, right, we're actually going to have our family meeting a little bit later. We're going to do it at 10. So by 10 o'clock, you need to be ready for church. So you've got all morning to do it. We've got teenage girls in the house. So we've got, the straighteners out and the curlers going and the hairdryer, and now we've got makeup and eyelash curlers and all kinds of things happening.
It's ridiculous, honestly.
And the 9-year-old wanting to get involved in it all and changing outfits 100 times. And so it just kind of turns into this really big affair.
Yeah.
But what was so beautiful this week, watching it happen, they actually kind of took it on board and they spent the morning together getting ready. Mm. They had the 19-year-old helping out with their hair and makeup and it was just, there was such a different feel in the house, like so different. It was just really peaceful, really unifying and just, it just felt great to be there. And it just reminded me how important it is. We can kind of, jam pack our days, but we're on the go all the time. And when we don't have margin, it's really easy for emotions to become frayed and for, kind of things to kind of get out of hand.
Yeah.
And so what I loved about Sunday was just that because I created the margin for everybody, it meant that we were able to have this day that just felt great.
I feel like you've taken a leaf out of the Chris and Philippa Slow Parenting Parental Guidance book.
It felt great. Slow parenting. I love it.
So that's your win. Your take-home message is margin.
Create margin. We've got the routine. We know that we leave the house at 11:30 every Sunday.
Yeah.
That's kind of the end product. But filling in the gap between wake-up time and 11:30 has meant that we've created a system that actually works.
I want to share a quick story that I've shared a few times before, maybe even on the podcast, but I think it's really relevant here. And it kind of, I guess it just really underscores the point that you're making. You'll remember this story well. Many years ago when I think we were expecting our third child, Ella, who is now 19, I decided that I was going to be super helpful around the house. I knew that you weren't feeling great. I think you were laying down having a rest. I saw that there was a whole lot of washing that needed to be done. And so being the sensitive load sharing guy that I am, I just knew that it needed to be done. And I didn't check with you. I just went to the laundry and I sorted out the pinks because we already had two daughters. I sorted the pinks from the whites from the darks, and the darks pile was the biggest one by far. So I chucked everything in the machine. And once I'd gotten everything in that I could get, I sort of squished it down tighter and tighter and got all the rest of the washing in the machine as well. We had a 7.5 kilo Fisher and Paykel. I thought I can get 7.5 kilos worth of dry washing in here. And I just jammed everything in. And I put the powder in. I put a bit of extra powder in because I knew that it was a very, very full load. And when I turned the machine on, it made a whole lot of noises and it got going. It was really noisy on the spin cycle. And when I went to hang the washing out, I pulled it out of the machine and it was dirtier pulling it out than it had been when I put it in. And I'm sure that you recall this part very well. I was in the dining room browsing the Harvey Norman catalogue, looking at white goods, thinking we needed a new washing machine, and you asked me what I was doing. I explained why, and you went and had a look at the machine and saw that I'd effectively put about 2.5 to 3 loads worth of washing in and done it all in one load. And you were like, if you put too much in, you get a crappy result.
And that's sometimes what our lives feel like.
And
Totally.
And what you did on Sunday, which is so foreign to me because I'm all about cramming it in. Sunday just felt beautiful.
It really did. It was kind of one of those golden moments. It was almost perfect.
Well, that ties in with my I'll Do Better Tomorrow. Let me tell you what I learnt about parenting this week because of you. My I'll Do Better Tomorrow has 2 components to it. One of them is something that happened last Saturday, but I'm going to get to that in a sec. Before that, I want to talk about this same family meeting. See, when you told me that you didn't want to have the family meeting until 10 and everyone just needed to be dressed and ready by 10 so we could have the meeting and then have a bite to eat and leave, I just didn't think anything of it. I was like, okay, whatever, that's what we're doing. But because you did that, all of a sudden that freed me up to have a quiet morning. And I did. I just had the most beautiful Sunday morning that I can remember having in the longest time. I loved Sunday morning. Then we had our meeting. Everyone ate. And as part of that meeting, we did what we always do. Anyone who is a Happy Families newsletter subscriber knows that we send out a weekly pop-in email where we talk about what's worked and what hasn't worked and what's coming up. That's what our weekly newsletter is all about, what's working, what's not, and what's coming up. And our family meetings have a similar format, what's worked, what hasn't, and what are we going to work on this week. So we talked about what has been good and what hasn't been so good. And when we got to the what hasn't been so good, the kids identified that we just haven't been, well, we've been pretty tense, and there's been a lot of snarkiness and unkindness. And so when we talked about what we should work on this week, we only ever pick one thing. And usually, this is the hard thing for me, Kylie. Usually we have this conversation, but nothing actually changes. We're not very good at being accountable and keeping the kids accountable because we're so darn busy. And we have the meeting, we talk about our good intentions, and then we just totally forget about it because we've got so much to do. But this time, the kids all agreed that we need to be nicer to each other. It wasn't us saying it, it was them. And I was like, okay, this is a good start. And then I remembered this incident that had happened just a couple of days before, and I shared it with the kids. Somebody had done something they shouldn't have done. They'd made a really big mess. It was somebody external to the family. It was somebody outside of our home situation. And that person had a level of accountability to me. So I went to them and I told them that I wasn't happy about it at all. And instead of them trying to defend themselves, instead of them trying to make up excuses, instead of all that stuff, they just said, you know what, you're right. You're right. And when they said you're right to me without arguing, that when they just owned it, when they took responsibility, I was completely disarmed. Like I was ready for...
Deflated.
Yeah, I was ready for some confrontation.
All of that build-up. You had your speech ready, didn't you?
That's right. And they took all the air out of my speech. And I just thought... So I shared that with the kids and I said, maybe this week, if somebody is critical of you or if things aren't going well or if somebody reminds you to do something that you haven't done that you should have done, instead of being defensive, instead of arguing, maybe we can just work on those 2 words. Now, I know that this is not the solution to every conflict. In fact, sometimes we do need to fight back.
Well, I'm just going to stop you there because you said if somebody's being unkind to you, that you say, you're right, and we weren't encouraging that kind of behaviour. This is more about, it's really about showing a level of humility. When you recognise that you've got it wrong.
Yeah.
That's what this is about, not about just acquiescing to everything that happens.
Yeah, we're not teaching our children to be people pleasers or to roll over and accept any criticism that comes their way. So context is important here.
Because what happens more times than not is we get defensive.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to deflate.
You're right. You're right. So anyway, but the beautiful thing was we'd had this really calm morning, which fed into a really calm family meeting, which only took about 15 minutes, which led into this ongoing joke for the rest of the day and for much of the week. Those 2 words, you're right. We've heard them hundreds of times, and there's been so much levity and so much fun. There's been so much joy in our family around people just going, you're right.
Except for our 15-year-old.
Yes.
She's got a one-liner back.
Which is?
I know I'm right.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I know.
And that's where the levity comes from more than anything. She just goes, yep, I know I'm right.
So what I wanted to highlight is that these meetings are important, but they don't always work. But with the right mindset, with the right margin, and with that level of humor and playfulness, all of a sudden you can really move the needle. And this week, I have to be honest, I didn't say this in last week, so I'll do better tomorrow, because I had a reasonably decent story to tell. But like a day after we recorded that, I was ready to quit parenting. We had 2 or 3 really hard days, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm back to that point where I'm done with this. I'm over it. And then on Sunday, we just had this great meeting and nailed it. So that's my I'll do better tomorrow. Have the meeting, talk about what went well, what didn't, and the one thing we're going to work on this week, and then work out how you're going to implement it and watch what happens.
And while you do that, create margins, slow down.
Great take-home messages. All right, I need to share one more thing that has been an absolute highlight. It kind of sits aside or adjacent to our I'll do better tomorrow, but I've just got to mention it. On Saturday last week, I was scheduled to speak at the Star Casino on the Gold Coast at the Australian Childcare Alliance annual conference. This thing is huge. There's like 1,500 people in the audience in the grand ballroom. It's massive. The lights and the stage and the audience and the energy, it's just fabulous. You and I spoke to the kids, and things weren't good on Friday, and you almost said, I'm not going. But at the last minute, the kids came to us and said, we promise we'll be good. And they all worked out a way that they could make things work. So you came with me, and the kids looked after themselves. They're all old enough to have done that and have appropriate supervision. But you came with me to the Gold Coast. We got to have a night away, and on Saturday morning, I stood up as the opening keynote speaker for 1,500 people at the Australian Childcare Alliance conference for a 60-minute introductory conversation about attitude and having a great attitude about life. Are you an energy vampire, or are you a positive energizer? We're 2/3 of the way through the talk, and I remembered a story that was not the story that I would normally tell at that point of that talk. But you were in the audience, and it's a story that's really your story. And so without giving you any notice at all, I said, Kylie, why don't you come up on stage in front of this 1,500 people and tell this story? And what did you do?
I put on my big brave face.
Pulled up your big girl pants.
And I walked up onto that stage with you.
And I handed you the microphone. I walked away, and you spoke for, 5, 6, 7 minutes? You made everybody in the audience cry with your beautiful story, got a huge round of applause, and then went and sat down. And I just wanted to mention that, okay, so I give a pretty good keynote, but when I get to give a keynote with you, even if it is unscripted and unplanned and it just happens, oh my goodness, you were so good. You were so brave. And again, this is why everyone loves you on the podcast, because you just nail it every single time. So there's no I'll do better tomorrow there. I just want to acknowledge how great you are.
Don't get a big head, but it was actually the highlight of my week, watching you on stage. It's really hard sometimes being the stay-at-home mum who watches you disappear week after week to do your job. And it's been a really, really long time since I've had the opportunity to actually sit in the audience and watch you. And it just reminded me of how gifted you are. You're so gifted at what you do. Your ability to remember details, for starters, but it's not even the details. It's the passion. There is just so much passion and desire within you to bless other people's lives, because you recognize and know that the message that you share is so important. And so for me, sitting there, just being rekindled with all of the emotion that comes with watching somebody who just loves their job and believes in it so much, helps me let you go a little bit easier. So it was an absolute highlight and a privilege to be able to sit there and watch it.
Well, I loved having you on the stage with me. I can't let this opportunity go. I wasn't thinking of this, but you've just said that. So when you get an endorsement like that, you have to let people know that if they're interested in having me come and speak, they can send us an email. Just contact Caroline at happyfamilies.com.au. That's Caroline at happyfamilies.com.au for schools, for corporates, for conferences, well-being, empathy, relationships, family, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's our I'll Do Better Tomorrow for today. We really hope that you've enjoyed the Happy Families podcast and that you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend with your family, creating margin and having a whole lot of fun. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. For more info about making your family happier or to support the work that we do and make your own family happier, check out our Happy Families memberships at happyfamilies.com.au.